Hi folks. So a couple of days ago I did a video, our preoccupations have gone from baking to the state of our hair. So the days of banana bread and brownies and cookies are increasingly behind us, and our appearance is starting to take on more of a priority, including hair taking shape and falling in ways and in places that you just can't, whatever. It's like I've never seen my hair like this before. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who feels this way. So anyway, welcome to, for those of us who are actually lucky enough to contemplate our hair these days. But that's not what this video is about. 2 days ago, I did a video that encapsulated all the buildup that is to come between the middle of May, where we are now, to the end of June. And actually from the middle of May to the middle of July. And eclipse season is what I will call it. And quite frankly, it started around April the 5th, the week before and week after April the 5th. And I thought, well, the next set of videos that I'm going to do are really going to be breaking down each of those transits step by step. And so much is going on over the next few days, right? Past couple of days, next few days. The planets Saturn and Jupiter go retrograde. Venus goes retrograde in a few hours. So that's 3 planets going retrograde. Mercury enters Gemini today. That's 4 things right off and Mars enters Pisces, 5 things. Around May the 15th, between May the 10th and May the 15th. And I thought, where should I start? And I thought I'm going to start, even though with the Jupiter and Saturn retrograde, there's some conversation at least that's waiting to be had imminently about the July 4th eclipse in Capricorn. I'm going to actually start with the Gemini-Sagittarius axis, because as I look ahead to the next 9 or 10 major planetary movements, half of them have to do with, or impact half or more than half. I did this thing where I was just like 5 or 6 of them have to do with the sign of Cancer and sign of Sagittarius and the fact that Mars is moving into Pisces. And the first of the eclipses that we have is a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius on June the 5th, which means that the sun is going to be in Gemini and the moon is going to be in Sagittarius. So the new eclipse axis of Sagittarius Gemini are what are activated first. So we're gonna build on this Gemini Sagittarius thing first. When it comes to the sign of Gemini, Venus moved into Gemini on April the 4th. And actually, before I get into this, there are 2 things I want to mention overall in terms of where we are at. First and foremost, we're in the new moon cycle that occurred in Taurus. The new moon was in Taurus on April the 22nd, something like that. It was conjunct Uranus. And today, news emerged that the Twitter CEO had said that employees at Twitter could work from home ongoing, forever. Search for the headlines and you'll find it. And that to me was, I don't know of a headline that is more new moon conjunct Uranus than that. It's liberating. The use of technology is involved, and really the argument seemed to be we're able to make it work with people living at home, so let's just keep going. The new moon in Aries cycle, as I mentioned, which was conjunct Chiron, had the theme, this was the end of March to end of April, had the theme of wounding and healing. And as I said, we may find that when it comes to wounding and particularly healing, we can trace back the germ of the healing to that time. The new moon in Taurus was conjunct Uranus, and the theme was one of liberation. And while it may seem that the contemplation of opening things up is part of this liberation, in a sense it is becoming increasingly clear to me that the liberation is more complex than that. And the idea of technical innovation and how far we have come just in 4 to 6 weeks. Guys, just look back to when the quarantine and lockdown began and look at where you are now. And tell me that something hasn't happened that moves you forward in a significant way. Now, with these retrogrades coming up, could things be reconsidered? Sure. But I remember multiple clients, even till recently, coming to me saying, you said this would move and that would move and this would happen or that would happen, and we're in lockdown. And my response was, the chart says things will continue to happen. And in all of these cases and more, significant things have continued to happen even though we are in lockdown or quarantine. significant openings, significant developments. It's not been a still time. The first 3 or 4 weeks may have been a still time when we were contemplating wounding and healing, but especially around and since the new moon in Taurus, there are quantum leaps of forward movement, and April, as I said, was a month of forward movement. Think to the start of April and where you were, and think to where you are today. In a very short time, in many respects, there's kind of been a quantum move forward, and it remains a surprisingly active time. Well, some of that is going to start shifting in terms of its nature and its essence, changes upon us, and we as people have to now catch up to these changes. And in a sense, the headline today is part of this reconsideration, reevaluation, catching up to where we are at. With Uranus, technology plays a big role, and a lot of the things when they're introduced and they're new, we have resistance to them. Online learning, classes and lectures being done online. But I'm increasingly hearing people say, well, it gives you more flexibility. You can go in and learn and pick up whatever you need to. You can join it as it's happening. You can pick it up later on. It creates more balance. The planet is healthy and happier. Is it replacing FaceTime and being in the office? No, but there's a lot more that is possible, and there is freedom. Not having to be in one place and at a desk at a certain time, in a classroom at a certain time. And sometimes it is necessary, but is it really hampering learning and growth? Sometimes it has to be hands-on, sometimes it helps to be together. But what about the freedom and flexibility and the lighter footprint on the planet as a result of not shuttling around and thinking you have to be places in order to get them done? In today's day and age, with technical innovation, Uranus, and communication in that, how much can be done from where you are and how much flexibility and freedom can it afford you? And FaceTime and connection, hopefully, eventually, with the people you hold dear, so that those relationships don't suffer for, one could easily argue, more superficial ones to some extent. Doesn't mean that those relationships go away. The second thing I want to mention before I dive into Mercury and Gemini is that I do think that, I know we're opening up and a certain kind of liberation is part of this, but I fear a relapse as we head to June the 29th. And as I've said to you before, if the Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions are somehow exaggerating or playing a role as far as the pandemic are concerned, then there's a part of me that's watching these openings up only to wonder whether we're going to have to shut down again until we gather momentum and we head to November, because that's the third and the final one, head to the end of the year. So I wonder if in some ways the virus, the restriction and all the social and political turmoil and reactivity it is creating. Okay, I'm going to expand on this more in another future video, but I want to throw both those things there because I want us to start to look at words that we are banding about, certainly I'm banding about, like liberation, and understand that those words are still the right words, but how they're showing up is still very much in God's hands. And it's interesting in many respects as to how things are evolving, and they are evolving. Things are not at a standstill. Now, certainly, with the number of planets going retrograde, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus at around the same time, Mars changing signs, and then Mercury on June the 19th going retrograde, we've got enough going on not to ignore the eclipses. So it's catch-up time, it's change time, it's its own kind of, as I called it in my last video, the storm is building. So Venus entered Gemini on April the 4th, and starting April the 4th, at least a certain amount of financial and relationship activity took on a heavy communication aspect. Some of this communication, seriously, my hair is like a bird's nest. I can't do anything with it. The communication, talking, speaking, and you would say, well, we can't do it in person. And I'm like, I know, but haven't you been? Over email, social media, technology, Gemini, connecting, technology, iPhones, mobile devices, talking, chatter, TED Talk kind stuff, Zoom. Oh my God, between Mercury and Uranus, between Gemini, Venus and Gemini and Uranus, it's likely or possible that financial opportunities, relationship opportunities, clients have been making a lot more chatter, ironically, because we're in lockdown and quarantine, but reconnecting with friends, connecting with friends, clearly over technology, old friends, new friends, colleagues, cars, vehicles, strangely enough, maybe even since April at a certain point, getting the impetus to start going out in walks, your neighborhood, and getting a certain amount of benefit, Venus, flow, harmony, balance, beauty, enjoying your immediate environment and surroundings a little bit more when you do go for that walk. The skies are higher and clearer, the air is cleaner. All these Geminian things, listening and talking and writing and speaking, skill acquisition, teaching in some ways, not in a broad-minded spiritual way, but in terms of skill acquisition. With Venus here, opportunities that are Geminian could very well have shown up since April the 4th. And it would behoove you and me and all of us to pay attention to who it is that we've been interacting to since the beginning of April, because with Venus going retrograde shortly, some of that is going to go through this reevaluation process. Now, I've already done a Venus and Gemini video that I will link to at the end of this, and it's in 2 parts. The first part is longer than the second part, significantly. The second part was a few afterthoughts. And with Venus retrograde, as I've mentioned, what do you value? Really, what is it all about? Why are you here? And therefore, when it comes to your relationships and your finances and your spending at this time, all of that could go through a reevaluation to make sure that everything is lined up with what it is that you value and where you want to go. If you are experiencing financial tightness, and you might, and this is when it might catch up with you, the impact of everything that has been going on with you between May the 15th and June the 29th. Oh my God, that doggy and that barking driving me bananas as I'm trying to focus and get you the information that I want to get you. Okay. Maybe he's just agreeing with me. Reevaluation. Where's your money going? Where are you spending it? Do you have enough? What is it for? What do you own? And what owns you? And the question of what do you own? What do you serve and what is serving you? Are your resources serving you? And where are you headed with them? In certain cases, some of this reevaluation is practical. And I'm sorry if you're someone who's dealing with it because funds are running out or funds are running low, or somewhere the reevaluation comes with its share of sadness and challenges, contemplating having to move. I'm sorry if the resource crunch for some of my listeners, some of you, it is a graver and sadder than the larger question here. Still, I would say, becomes what is critically important what is the flame that you're going to continue to shelter as the storm brews around you. Okay, for some people that flame is your primary goal while you're here, what you're trying to move towards. So therefore, how does everything align around it? Money and relationships. And for some of you, it may be that some of this thinking is much more urgent and much more practical based on financial shortages. And relationships are probably being tested too. Now, as Venus goes retrograde, opportunities from before or the reevaluations might become a lot more urgent and a lot, we may really go into thinking about who is in the boat with us and who belongs in the boat with us and who doesn't, and what is going on financially. Now, why am I harping on Venus retrograde in Gemini in a Mercury in Gemini video? Venus came in on April the 4th. Mercury came in on, May the 11th. April the 3rd actually is when Venus came in. Mercury comes in May 11th, yesterday. Stays till May the 28th. Mercury rules Gemini. And over the past few days, but especially now, While with Venus, it's about relationships and money. With Mercury in Gemini, since yesterday, and you may find that for the rest of May, conversations and writing and documents and contracts and communication ratchets up just that much more. There's an urgency. All those things that Venus announced and brought in terms of support in relationships and who's with you and who's not, and what's going on financially and financial opportunities through communication and through socials, all of it takes on greater urgency in terms of processing and an urgency to discuss, an urgency to sort out, an urgency to process, an urgency to seek clarity, an urgency for the mind to try and organize information and data in terms of talking and listening, an urgency to translate what is coming up intuitively into fact, a focus on facts, and a way to understand how you can get on this surfboard of information and surf the waves that are being offered to you. A desire to control and manage everything around you through communication becomes exaggerated. As I've mentioned in my videos to you before, I'm not necessarily all that crazy about strong planets, just as I'm not crazy about weak planets. Mercury is very strong in Gemini, and so somewhere, and this is true for others and it's also true for us, we've got to watch for the slickness. We've got to watch for the salesmanship. We've got to watch for the smoothness. We've got to watch for using words to influence things in certain directions because we want them selfishly and we want to see what we can get away with. The Gemini gets a bad rap. You know, you can't do anything alone, so don't knock Gemini because it is in communication. One could argue that effective communication can make the difference between life and death. I don't think one has to argue it. I think it's clear to many of us. Effective communication at times of crisis can mean the difference between life and death. And so don't knock Gemini in terms of the ability or need to be present and understand how to fit in with people in your immediate surrounding and around you, and how important talking and listening and writing and communication, the power of the word is. Words are everything. How we process what we think, what we project, how we manifest what we manifest, how we think about ourselves, how we think about what's possible for us. Words are everything. Not to say how words impact everybody around us, and other people's words in writing and emails and communication impact us. With Mercury in Gemini, this ratchets up. There is some truth to the dark side of Gemini, which is, how can I be popular? How can I manipulate? Gossip. Gaining power from data and information and listening, and then knowing how to talk to who to talk to navigate power and try and exercise influence. It becomes really important with the planet of Mercury, which is an enemy, I would say, of Jupiter. It becomes very important to try to, when Mercury is strong, keep intention and spirituality and a sense of personal morality and integrity in mind, because Mercury will try to knock that. So as long as Mercury is not knocking Jupiter out of the equation, and you've got access to spirit or access to clarity and intention, and know what you're doing and why you're doing it, you'll be able to navigate these times and use Mercury's power to do what needs to be done. Just be careful that your mind and your mouth and your fingers may be trying to run the show a little too much. Now, I started with Venus because there's a buildup occurring in Gemini, right? You have Venus April the 3rd coming in, Mercury coming in on the 11th, Venus going retrograde on the 13th, the Sun coming in on the 20th, and then the new moon in Gemini on the 22nd. All these planets in Gemini squaring Neptune and Mars in Pisces, squaring that part of your chart where there were crises in late 2015, 2016, and we're still spiraling out of those crises. And we're going to be spending a lot of time dealing with those and asserting ourselves in that space between the middle of May and the end of June also. And when it's a square, it's like the wheels get stuck around each other, and there's a tension and enough force. There has to be enough of a breakthrough to unjam them so they can start moving again together. There's a conflict that is created, a tension that is created that requires a solution. And we are forced to find that solution. If you look and see where Gemini is in your chart and where Pisces is in your chart, you may see in very literal and simple terms in a sentence where this, I'll call it a power struggle, is occurring. But it's a power struggle between individuals, perhaps with Mercury and Venus in Gemini, and a theme or a subject with Mars and Neptune in Pisces. Okay? Mercury's entry here means that as Venus goes retrograde and we start to reevaluate the sheer power behind, it's not a quiet internal reevaluation. It is the reevaluation is certainly internal, but it is covered by, it is linked to, it is smothered by, it is accompanied by a fair amount of external chatter and conversation and using the mind to make sense of what is going on. And wherever Mercury is in your chart, you can and will and should expect communication. And with Mercury in that part of the chart with Venus retrograde, past people perhaps coming up for conversation, past issues, past individuals. With Gemini, siblings, relatives, cousins, neighbors, colleagues, conversations, writing, speaking, talking while you're reevaluating. It all kind of goes together. Interestingly, Mercury's out of here by the 28th of May. Mercury's out of here by the 28th of May. And that still leaves another month for Venus to be retrograde. So the reevaluation process, whatever occurs during the month of May is gonna inform this reevaluation, but then the reevaluation will continue during the month of June. And Venus is in, there is a resolution here, guys, because Venus goes direct on June the 25th and she's still in Gemini till August the 7th. And then we have a lunar eclipse, thank you, in Gemini on November the 30th, which means September 30th onwards, that's going to be building up. And then we have a solar eclipse in Sagittarius in the middle of December. So, you know, the eclipses, the new set of eclipses are here. And while Gemini doesn't get to have an eclipse, it gets to have enough firepower, planetary power in it, concentrated by the time the June 5th lunar eclipse occurs, with the moon in Sagittarius facing off the sun and Venus retrograde at that point in time. By that time, Mercury will be in Cancer. So, anxiety, a desire to manage and control. What are the facts? What is going, communication, emails, reevaluation, a conflict, a fear of loss in a certain area, a needing to release certain things in certain areas, but there being other people at play where there are conversations occurring or needing to occur and reevaluations occurring. All of that could be somehow at play here. And if you pay attention, as I said, if you know your chart and you can see where Gemini sits and Pisces sits, then you might be able to see where that conflict is building up. Let me start to summarize this because there's clearly more to talk about when it comes to Gemini. Venus in Gemini, April the 4th, relationship, financial opportunities, emerging or coming from the part of the chart where Gemini sits in your chart, that house and what it stands for. But for people, because this is a general reading, starting to take on more of a social flavor, relationships and finances. Artistic opportunities, creative opportunities with Venus, starting to take on more of a social communication, technical, hey, I mean, Zoom plays and technology is being used for creative endeavors in new ways all the time and more increasingly. So that would be starting the month of April. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Venus getting ready to go retrograde till June the 25th, forcing us to reevaluate and take stock of experience financial tightness, going over relationships and reevaluations. But with this reevaluation for the next 3.5 weeks, we've got Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, in the house, emphasizing the need for the mind to catch up with and try to make sense of as much as it can through communication with regard to our interactions and technology around us, contracts, writing, speaking, listening, talking, managing, controlling, while this reevaluation is occurring. And there is a dynamic here between Mercury and Venus that I don't even want to try to put into words anymore. Internally, what do I need to do financially? Internally, who is with me, who is for me, who is in the boat with me, who is not? How do I feel about this person, particularly if they have been around for a while or have emerged a little bit out of the woodwork since the beginning of April? Question marks around relationships and finances. Maybe artistic opportunities or relationship, or maybe opportunities, even professional opportunities that were brewing, coming back up for the past to be revisited. Keep an eye out for those till the end of June. Don't lose heart with this reevaluation, because Venus does go direct and is in the house till August the 7th. And so even as the energies start to clear by the middle of July, you've got a period where some of this stuff that is brewing, that's going to go through this tussle and go through this reevaluation, will be able to manifest a lot more fully. Oh, my hair. But you've got now Venus, you've got Mercury becoming extraordinarily strong. So even if you pay attention to the past 4 or 5 days, using words to clear the air, to gain clarity, to exercise influence, and technology to get things to move forward till the 28th. Words. Interactions, communication. So internally, reevaluation, question marks around finances, people. Externally, the mind and your mouth and your fingers on overdrive, trying to pay attention to everything that is going on around you so that you can make sense of it and gather information and data. And some of that data feeds into this reevaluation. But with Venus, the reevaluation is held separately. But there's no question that there's a dynamic between the two till the 28th. Mercury is still in Gemini at the time of the new moon in Gemini on the 22nd. So that new moon is going to be owned by Mercury. So even though Mercury moves into Cancer on the 28th, that whole lunar cycle is still going to have a Mercury and Gemini imprint on it. So keep your intentions clear and get in there if you need to get in there and have some conversations or send some emails or try to get clarity and see what emerges, and keep your ear close to the ground and see what is coming back. Feedback and the ability to take feedback and listen to feedback and pay attention to feedback and pay attention to body language, non-body language these days. Very important. And as a matter of fact, people who master the sign of Gemini are able to read people some would say intuitively, but it's not, it's almost intuition, but it isn't quite intuition. It is through the eyes, through the mind, but it is an awareness in a sense of the other person and what's going on with them. As I said, it can move into slickness. Salespeople need to have that, project managers need to have that ability to read team members and what's going on around them. But in a positive way, that kind of feedback can be invaluable in giving you a sense of where you are and grounding you through this reevaluation process. And it's not just reevaluation. This reevaluation is critically important to this eclipse of release in Sagittarius on June the 4th. Critically important. It's opposing critically important. So that even if we don't have an eclipse in Gemini and we have a normal new moon, the eclipse conversation is starting. You have to lean into the eclipses in Gemini when they start to happen, the first of which is November the 30th. I think that dog is telling me that I'm talking for too long. You have to lean into where Gemini is in your chart. So for the next year and a half, next 2 years, leaning into interactions becomes important for all of us. Talking, speaking, being present, dealing with siblings and cousins and neighbors and cars and vehicles and commuting and whatever's going on around you becomes really quite important, and a place of growth, a place of development, picking up the sword, taking care of business in that way. It's not a time to be aloof the next 2 years. It is not a time to be aloof. It is not a time to move away from technology. It is not necessarily a time to move away from social media, although I would encourage everyone to define what their boundaries are with social media. But it's not a time of separating from change and innovation. More importantly, it's not a time from separating from communication overall. And if you know where Gemini is in your chart, that is where you need to move towards and lean into. So if this Gemini eclipse season is starting with a Venus retrograde and Mercury entering it, you know, the ruler of Gemini comes in to kick off this period during a Venus retrograde, you've got to know that that's important. You've got to know that it's setting the stage in some ways for the next 2 years. Thematically, this period does, in terms of where does that change is going to occur. Okie dokes, more videos to follow. If you like this video, found it useful, feel free to share it, like it, comment on it, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button and you'll know when I'm doing new videos. My email address is in the subject area, and you can contact me if you are interested in finding out rates for readings, or if you're interested in finding out rates for me making an easy to read version of your chart so that you know which sign sits in which house, but you're going to need to know your birth time and birth location for that. All right. This was a kind of a Mercury in Gemini video, considering I thought it would be 15 minutes long, and it is 33 minutes long. Chatter, chatter, chatter. All right, over and out.